Hi, so I'm here with Laura Daligan today, and we're going to be speaking about shape-shifting within the Norse Sagas, and also a little bit of idea about how you can use that information within your own Seath and Norse witchcraft work. So Laura, I've known for a really long time. And in fact, she's the artist for my book covers, and not just my book covers, lots of book covers. But that's not just everything Laura does. Laura also teaches witchcraft courses, and she's an expert in Viking literature, which is why, obviously, this is the best person to talk to about this subject area, because she's an expert in witchcraft, but also in the Viking literature. So before I start talking Norse, I'll let Laura tell you a little bit about herself in her own words.
Oh, thank you, Katie. Yeah, hello everybody. I am currently studying an MLit in Viking Studies, and because we're in a magical space, I can tell you the reason I'm studying it is because I was at a big Viking festival in York, which is a lovely, the Jorvik festival is fantastic, and it was just before lockdown, so it was like the last gig I'd been to before everything shut down. And it was like, what I love, and I'm not against the looks of the whole Viking fashion. Like, I think it's cool, and I think it's good people to reclaim themselves, and I like it. However, I also feel that it can be just the visuals and not the soul. And I think she literally appeared in front of me and she said, go to the roots of this. All words to that effect. She kind of just appeared like, look beneath, go to the roots. And I was like, oh yeah. And then lockdown hit, and then we were sitting at home, and even though I'm an artist, with the mental craziness of lockdown, I struggled to paint because I was like, I can't deal with that feeling. I can deal with maybe studying. So I started studying the sagas, and I started doing these little tiny courses, and I just started like doing these little things here, there. And I thought, I found out that there was a master's you could do online. And it was at the end of near the end of lockdown, I put it off because I didn't think I was clever enough, and then I just went for it and I got on straight away. And then when I went back to Jorvik last year, I was like, Freya, I did it. I've done my homework. I haven't finished my dissertation yet. That's the last thing to do this year. But and so being Freya, the kickstart that I needed to do this, then my dissertation being on shape shifting and being on particularly with avian, with birds. And I kind of talked to my tutor about this, and I was like, is there enough to write a dissertation on birds? And he went, yeah. And the more I read, I'm like, oh my God, yes, there is. Like, there is so much when you start diving into it that I've got to stay on track. So I know that wasn't really about me, that's about the journey here, but I felt like that was a good point to add.
I think that was really important, and I think it's really interesting to hear your connection with Freya. So lots of people who are interested in Seath find Freya as a patron or as a deity they work very closely with. So we know that she does this. We know she says, get on with it, do this. She sets you tasks. So who wouldn't listen?
No, exactly. It was really clear. And I was like, yeah, sure. But I didn't think that it meant, doing a master's. I thought it just meant just read some good books. But I went full Aries into it and went, okay. But it's interesting because I've met a couple of other, obviously it's an online master's at the University of Highlands and the Islands in Orkney, and I have been up to Orkney, but you have to do it at home. So and I have met, it's interesting, like there's this new species of particularly female heathen pagans on there that are causing a little bit of a ruckus, going, well, actually, when you're being told, yes, it's just a myth, the gods aren't real, you can hear everyone going, and I don't think some of the older guys know quite what to do with that, like, oh, okay.
I've noticed a real resurgence over the last couple of years in interest in Norse paganism, and I've also I've noticed that people are using the term Norse pagan now rather than heathen or rather than Norse witch. So there seems to be a real shift in Norse pagans, in people who work with Freya and with the Viking style energies.
Yeah, absolutely. And and it's huge, isn't it? And I think even that there's a couple of Viking shots in Glastonbury. I always feel like Glastonbury knows, you know, you always feel what's going on with the pagan world, what's fashionable, like the witchcraft shops come and go, the hippie shops come and go, and then there's two very established Viking shops here, particularly Weird Raven near me, and just it's actually, I think I've talked about this before, that as a thing for men in the spiritual community particularly, I feel like it's a really strong thing for them to connect with something, you know, that the women come to Glastonbury to do their witchy stuff, and the men
Mm.
often sit in the pub going, oh gosh, and now they're kind of going, oh, I can go and like look at Odin things and look at Thor and learn about that kind of stuff. So I feel like it's a good for not just for men obviously, but I've just seen that here, that there's a sense of, oh, there's a changing in how men's spirituality is, as well as opening up to different elements of female spirituality as well.
Mm. And it's interesting how so many more women are interested in the Norse traditions now. I was watching that. Do you remember that A Pagan's Progress documentary? It came out in 97 or 98, and I was
Oh,
watching
ring
it and
bells.
yeah, somebody shared it today and I was watching it, and the heathens are basically this group of men
Yeah.
sitting around a table in a pub, not looking kind of pagan at all, you know, and then you go to the witches and there's lots of crushed velvet, and it's just interesting how heathenry has changed so much.
Yeah.
And we see lots of women involved now.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I mean, I think as well as also why it's not the easiest thing for us to study, but because obviously it was the Scandinavians were the last to turn Christian. At least we do have more records, so in a way it's easier to dive into the sagas and the rituals and what happened, even though we don't have it all written down.
Mm,
We can really, it's more tangible than some other, like, you know, if you like Anglo-Saxon spirituality, you've really got to go, like you've really got to dig deep, because it was such a long time ago when that shifted. But being, you know, around 1000 1002 was it 1000 1100 and 1200s, when, you know, when Scandinavia became Christian, and that it was a remnant hanging on for so much longer, you can, that's in closer memory to be able, and written memory to be able to find out about. So I think it's a really good base. And obviously, you know, that kind of feminine power and the warrior and the Valkyrie is very appealing to lots of feisty pagan women as well.
absolutely. And what I find really interesting is where we know why some of this stuff happened, and that some of this stuff happened because it
Yeah.
was banned. So we're looking
Yeah.
at things where the governments are saying you're not allowed to do this and you're not allowed to do this, and you know, all these years later we're reading it going, I want to do that. We're still excited by the prospect of the things that were banned.
Yeah, and it's a law against it. It meant enough people must have been doing it for someone to go, holy crap, this has got to stop. But things like, you know, when it's, you know, putting your children out in the cold, I mean, that was had to be
Mm.
banned, didn't it? And that was quite like, you've got to stop it. And people are like, oh, really? It's like, you know, you've got to stop putting your children out in the cold, okay?
So talk to me about the shape shifting. So we don't really have a concept of that within British tradition at all. So with all the kind of folk tales and things here, that apart from a kind of a werewolf here and there, we don't have that shape shifting tradition. So
Mm,
explain it to me, what the sagas say
yeah.
about shape shifting.
Yeah, it's interesting because the way the sagas speak, you can tell that people saw how a human was very differently to how a human is seen today. Like, you know, you're Katie, I'm me, and this is that. We look like this. You could generally recognize us, but that there could be aspects of that person that at a certain time could shift, or under a certain mood. It was more commonly accepted, and it seemed to be like in the sagas they write about. You know, there's a lot of shape shifting, or you know, that the guy down the road could be a bear on the full moon. You know, that kind
Mm.
of thing. And also it seemed to be a very gendered way in which people would shapeshift. Again, I never going to Snorri bash. People are going to go, oh, Snorri was Christian. I will never bash Snorri because he wrote it down. If he didn't write it down, we'd be absolutely up shit creek without a paddle. And he really helped us keep those things alive. But because he did have to write it for a Christian audience to be acceptable by the god, he did put as many goddesses as he possibly could, but they're
Mm.
kind of pared down in stories. So you have to really go deep to find and journey and do ritual to find what the goddesses are doing. But there's a lot more about what the men are doing and their shape shifting. But you can tell by things like, you know, Freya's Valhammer, her falcon cloak, and that she lends it to Loki, and no one else gets to borrow it, do they? It's really interesting. I think you can just tell, like, okay, well, to turn into a bird was very female, but Odin and Loki did that.
Interesting. I'd never realized that there was gender within that. So I talk a lot about Norse gender, particularly with Seath, because of this whole kind of ergy thing. And the Norse seem to me far less gendered than other societies at that time, particularly those that come from the kind of Greek or Roman. So
Yeah.
Norse women always seemed very much freer and more able to do things. So talk me through the gender in terms of the cloaks and the birds versus the bears.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, the feeling is, I know that the giants could turn into eagles, and eagles is the only one that kind of is a bit more manly, I suppose. But to be fair, men aren't spoken turning into birds apart from Odin and Loki, and they're the two that are very gender fluid because they practice Seidr, and obviously, literally, Loki is transforming between both. And I thought you don't hear about Thor shapeshifting into a bird, or actually any other. And they always ask Loki to do it for them. It's always like, ask Loki, he'll do it. He's the one that's in between the worlds already. He's that liminal creature, and so you'd get the giants, who obviously represent chaos and wildness and not cultured like the Asgardians cultured, and so they could turn into birds. They often have the eagle giant turning into eagles, but you don't get any other men talking really of turning into birds. Odin, of course, in his ravens, and he can go in any shape and form that he chooses. But it feels a very feminine thing. The Valkyries turn into birds. But you don't really hear of the men doing so. You could say maybe a little bit that Wayland, he made a bird cloak, and there's something about him having webbed feet. So you could say that he could, but I've been really studying that poem quite a lot recently, so it's kind of in my head. But that does come more from a northern, an Arctic storyline, because of the way that it survived their longer stories of bird women and how they were goddesses. And I find that the most interesting, that how old tales of bird goddesses survived into the sagas. That's kind of really what I mean. I'm loving that aspect of it, and how their stories were changed to become acceptable, but they are ancient tales of these powerful bird goddesses that obviously, being birds, go from heaven to earth, and psychopomps and messengers of the gods, or gods themselves, and how they come into the stories of the Norse sagas. I'm finding that really, really fascinating. But yeah, you don't see many men shapeshifting into birds, and if they do, they're thought of a little bit, you say, ergy, a little bit gender. What now? What's going on? And that Wayland was meant to be an elf, so he's not even Voland was meant to be an elf, so he's not. If he shapeshifts into a bird, it's still not a human man doing manly human things, doing that bird shapeshifting. And I feel like, because feathered women are such an archaic deity and story that comes back from the beginning of our story times, and they are divine messages to men. It's not quite so common that you see the men doing it. Not saying it never happens, but it's not as kind of common.
That's really interesting. And I mean, I more and more over the last couple of years, I see Loki as being almost non-binary.
Yes,
I
completely.
there are times when I'll refer to, Loki as them rather than even kind of gender him. Them.
So he's trying to play with that now, isn't he? He's like, you can call me him,
yeah. He's like, I'm gonna overcomplicate this. So, I always read that Freya and Frigga had the falcon cloaks, and it was particularly falcon. So is this actually the translation, or is this modern myth to add the falcon?
It's definitely a hawk of some kind. I've seen lots of different translations, and so it's definitely a hawk. Hawk's skin is a horse cloak, horse skin, hawk, not horse, sorry. Most likely falcon, because they were the regal hunting birds, but that was only brought in a little bit later. So I was looking into that, about when falcon hunting was brought to Scandinavia. So that may have been an addition when that became part of the royalty and part of, or it might have been a different feathered cloak before, but when it became part of the royalty and that falconry was quite the thing of the rich people, that were like, oh yeah, Freya would definitely have a falcon's cloak because it was desirable to have that, and beautiful and sharp, and amazing hunters. Make a lot of noise, those falcons, don't they? We've got some in the church here and you can hear them screaming.
I really love falcons. They're a bird I really kind of have an affinity with, which is why I always kind of think, was it a falcon? And it is interesting that that comes from the royalty and the sense of monarchy, and the sense of almost kind of a different class that
I imagine the average
Asgard.
person wouldn't see Freya with a falcon. They'd probably see her with a pig, a boar. They'd give her a boar rather than, or they'd, because they wouldn't have that much. They'd be like, falcon, schmalcon, what now? They wouldn't really have much concept of falconry unless they were in the royal court. So, and it wouldn't be real for them, would it? Like, it would be, that's not my connection with Freya, and even cats, isn't it? Cats weren't for everybody in the Viking Age, which is hard to believe, but cats weren't really that common. So yeah, but because Freya comes or is linked or connected to Valkyries, it could have been other birds before that. It could have been the raven, it could have been the swan. There's so many swan maiden tales which I dived into and got really excited about. But they're not really mentioned that much in the Viking sagas. So maybe that Valkyries are made of tough, more crows and ravens and things like that. But yeah, I think falcon is right, or hawk is right for translation in the saga. But if it was always that, we're not sure.
And what do we know about the Valkyries?
Oh, they're very confusing. They can do anything they want. I mean, there's the Valkyries that I feel like come from the older tales, and then they mix in very nicely with like the Morrigan and other tales, which is not just me trying to make it happen. In fact, my dissertation tutor's like, please calm down, Laura, stop bringing everything into it, like focus on one thing. But I'm like, but look, they're similar to all these. And also, of course, the Norse and the Irish had obviously creating Dublin. They had a creating like it was a nice thing. Had a big connection. So the saga where I can't remember what it's called, it's in the Iceland. It's called it begins with D, and I'm never good at remembering names of things. But basically, it's set in Ireland, but it is a Norse saga of a battle, and there's these really quite terrifying women. You know the story, but they're terrifying, and they're going and they're weaving the battle out of blood and guts, and when the person sees it, he's disgusted. It's like, it's not a pretty thing. And I think that's kind of really linking to the more earlier origins of the or at least one face of the Valkyrie. That more frenzied death bringer or goddess of death, and not the sexy poster girls that we get to see now. And I feel like with the Valkyries, they're kind of, their roles sort of mix a little bit with the Norns, and they mix a sort of filia, like following a particular hero. They're very liminal beings because there's different stories from all over been written about them. But I feel like the older stories are where they're a little bit scarier. And maybe and when you've got the story of Sigurdrifa or Brunhilde, where there's a Valkyrie that's peed off Odin by choosing the other hero, and she's punished. But when you sort of hear back to the stories, it probably was before a more sort of male-dominated religion or whatever, that the Valkyries had very similar roles to Odin, or for my opinion. I mean, that's definitely my thought, that there's an earlier cult of these war goddesses that had that, because you see in Sigurdrifa, she's telling the laws, very much like Kavamar, where Odin's telling the laws. She's telling it how you do things, and it's a very similar thing. And I feel that sense of Odin kind of punishing her and putting it like in that place is almost a story of that shift of power, that you guys aren't in control anymore, I'm the one that does this. Or how people were seeing, because you get that in a lot of other, in Greece and everywhere, that you get that transfer of this older feminine, often feathered power that's transferred to the masculine. So they are, and so of course then they become love interests, because what do you do with a powerful woman then? She becomes like this sexy love interest, so which is interesting. And then she has her wings often taken from her and stolen from her. Makes you think of Maleficent when she has her wings taken from her in Disney. And then you have brain. There's a train of thought, and it went off on a Disney. Oh yeah, and then you have that kind of filial aspect where you get one Valkyrie favoring a particular hero and following them through their lives and being bound to them and supporting them and maybe coming back the next life to work with them again. And then you have them as like mead. Sorry, I'm going off on a right tangent. Sorry.
No, not a tangent at all relevant.
Yeah, I was just thinking about how people see, when you go to Valhalla and you get given mead by the Valkyries, it kind of seems a bit like a wish girl, like, oh yeah, you go and get the ladies in Valhalla, rather than that ancient ritual of bestowing blessings and wisdom on the hero by that drink of memory. So it's often seen as, oh, you go to Valhalla, you get some food, you get the girls. Where actually it's kind of, I feel that's a misconstruing of the women having that job of offering that mead of remembering, of wisdom to the noble dead. So Valkyries have all of those roles, but often they're just seen in bikinis.
Do they have bikinis?
I wouldn't want to say they shouldn't have them, but not the same anyone in a bikini, but I'm like,
but it's interesting how they've been so sexualized in our culture as well.
yeah,
So it's not just that their power was kind of eroded within the Viking Age, it's that we're still doing it now. And
yeah.
maybe we need to start reclaiming the Valkyries and start giving them swords again.
Yes, I love that. I was thinking about this when I was washing up earlier in my domestic bliss. That maybe because when they turned into when Christianity became more the religion, the Valkyries became a story rather than an actual fact of death. So they were terrified because they thought, maybe before, if there's a belief in Valkyries, that they would be there foretelling your doom, and that you'd be genuinely invested in that. That's scary. But when it became a story, then it lost its sting, and it became then able to go, what do women do? Oh, they're troublemakers, they're causing problems in relationships, or you want them but you can't have them, that kind of thing.
So this sort of stuff has been going on a very long time then. Yes, and
Yeah,
we're
and I
still
felt like
fighting.
still fighting. I think the sagas seem to be like really trying to be one side but going the other side. Like you can tell the Snorri's really wanting to put these old stories and say, but then going, but I can't say that, so I'll just bring it back down here.
So one thing that I've always been quite curious about is lots of questions come up about whether the Norse believed the myths. So the sagas, the sagas are written as history, but they've got some really fanciful things in. So that's a whole other kind of train of thought. But what I'm always curious about is when we have the talk of shape shifting, it's never really clear to me whether the Norse believed that somebody took on the shape, so they actually became a boar or a raven or a bear, or whether their energy came out of their body to do so. So we've got lots of instances of traveling, Odin traveling as though he was asleep or dead, the cloak over the head so you can't see that the body is gone. So what is it? Did the Norse genuinely believe that they were changing, or did they believe that part of their soul was coming out of their body and that was what was shape shifting?
Yeah, really. Yeah, it's such a good thing. I'm really fascinated by that as well. And there's even when Loki wears Freya's and Val's hammer and goes to the giants to get information about where Thor's hammer is. And Thor, who, not always the brightest of conversationalists, he says something really, really interesting to Loki when he tells Loki to tell him the story, tell the news before he comes down to Earth, because people tell lies when they land, but when he's in the air. So it's almost like he even feels right in that space that there is something of a journey, a shamanic journey, that he's in that journey space and he will speak now before he comes back down into his body, when his body could maybe tell lies about stuff. And I thought that, I don't know, I find that the whole, there's not much mentioned in that stanza apart from that. I thought it's interesting they mentioned that, like, stay there, Loki, tell me while you're in this form. So it was something like about in that shamanic state, whether it's a dream state, there was something where he couldn't lie like he could do if he was back in his body. So that makes me feel like it's not in his body that he's up there in a spirit form. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a tough one because the there's no such thing as Norse myths, really.
Mm.
Like, because it was like there's so many, there wasn't even Norway or Sweden or Denmark,
Mm.
was there, at the time? It was like so many different tribes, and he collected all these stories and put them best together. So you
Mm.
don't really know if one person in the north of Norway would believe very differently to someone in Denmark, or in the place. So you wouldn't say, oh, they all believe this, because they probably didn't. They, and even the place names kind of go along with that. So, but saying all of that, I feel like mostly they believe that a part of your soul, which we talk, the soul parts, could go
Mm.
into, there'd be a part of you that could shift, but also that they would recognize that as part of how someone would look as well, like how they'd have the eyes
Mm.
of a hawk, or how they would recognize that part of that was in their being.
Mm.
So I do feel that, but also I do feel like in things like more like the berserker cults, that they would maybe more take on a physical transformation. Not that they would actually
Mm.
be a bear, but they would take on that energy in their bodies, and that's more probably that sort of is the more manly side of things. I'm guessing. That's
Mm.
just a thought, but that when it was more birds, you would put a part of yourself up there, or you would go in, a part of your soul would go into that shape, or merge with the bird, or have a bird shaped philia or Hama that would go and do
Mm.
something for you. So I think they didn't actually believe that Bob would turn into a raven and come and peck you,
Mm.
but they might think a part of Bob could do that. you
Mm.
know, that's what I mean. I don't know. I can't say, but it sounds more like that it was more magical, rather that it was more, unless you were a magical being like a Valkyrie or a shapeshifter in that
Mm.
way, that it would, that it would be more a part of you would go.
Mm. It's really interesting, and I'm absolutely fascinated by the way that Thor was talking to Loki and saying, until you come back into your body, you can't lie. And that links in with so much psychology. It links in with the understanding of the subconscious, of the different layers that we have in kind of psychosynthesis. All of these things link in together. And the subconscious, the bit of our brain we connect with when we do hypnosis, that doesn't lie very well. It's
I love
it
that.
sometimes makes up stories if it thinks you want to hear them, but it's not great at lying. So
Devious, maybe. Yeah, like,
yeah, so it's really interesting to me looking at the way that the Norse had a concept of the things that we as a society kind of forgot for a really long time, until we came back to Mesmer and Freud and everyone from there. So I think that's such a fascinating thing, that the way we work in terms of having the soul come out of the body, having this idea of a trance state, they knew all that.
yeah, and pretty much mastery at it, like pretty much had it down. And it's interesting because, like you say, that one stanza about what Thor said, it's so short. And I was like, oh, I've got it. Like, it keeps going. Pay attention, pay attention. Like, there's something in that, because they didn't write down flourishing details, did they? They're like, this happened, this happened, this happened.
Mm.
It's a little bit like boom, boom, boom. And in fact, that was written in, not just like, tell us a story, Loki. Here's what happened. It was like, no, so it's almost like they were trying to tell us something that was being forgotten already. Maybe that was maybe already starting to be
Mm.
forgotten. That this was something that our ancestors knew, that you could send out that part of you in a form, get information, and come back.
Mm. So, is shape shifting in this way something you've done?
Yes, and actually, before I did the studying of it. Yeah, and it was and it's something that I find weirdly easy, like, natural thing to do. So that's probably why I was interested in, like, okay, but not actually in a useful way. Like, I don't have any great skills at going off and doing anything, because I haven't mastered anything with it. But the actual shifting space, I feel, is like, oh yeah, I can
Mm.
feel that happening quite easily. So you can imagine if you've been brought up in a space where you are, and I do think that, know that we are pagan hippies going on about the veils being thicker now, but I think that they are. I don't think it's easy to access certain conversations and connections with spirit as it would have been 2000
Mm.
years ago, because we've kind of put so many walls up around us. But if you were brought up in that era when you could have that ancestral or tribe talk experience of seeing someone do this and learning it, would have been such a part of culture and truth and reality, and so it was real for them because they could see it happening, but it didn't mean it was like movie real, because we're going to go thing by movies, don't we? We kind of go, we see Twilight or whatever, I don't know. Whatever, so much better werewolf movies. I don't know why I said Twilight. But where you see, oh, here's me, I'm now a wolf. And that's how then people ask you about witchcraft as well, don't they? You say, is it like the movies? And you go, no, but no, like it's never that exciting looking, is it? But still there's, and people expect magic and witchcraft to be like the movies, and they expect shapeshifting to be like the movies, but it's deeper and subtler, but still very real in that way.
So if I wanted to harness my bear energy, how would I do that? What would I do?
Yeah, I'd get a big comfy cuddly and just hide for the winter. Well, I'd make a connection with that animal first. Maybe not going and chatting to a bear if that's not possible, but some really great places now where animals are. Zoos are not great places, but like the Wild Place and Wildwood, and there's the places where there are animals kept in a better way. And there's a place in Bristol called the Wild Place Project, and they've got this amazing space for bears. Like, it's huge. I mean, I know it's not like being in the wild. I'm not kind of trying to say it is, but for a captivity place, this is beautiful, and they are. So there are places you can go and see these animals if it's right for you to do so, or watch documentaries or read about them. Like you're saying with the falcon, there's things you just see how beautiful they are, but I quite like that phrase associated with that because they're so loud. They scream, and they just like, then they're not dignified when they go for it, aren't they? They're just like so they look very beautiful, but then it's like finding those little things out, isn't it? Like, okay, watching them and finding out what they're like in these situations, and when their power times are, and what they do, what not like tuning into, you can look at power animal books or whatever that if you feel drawn to it, but maybe just following them and seeing what their habits are, what's their time of day, and then what connects you to them. What is it that connects you to that animal? What is your heart connection to it? What does it make you feel? And I would just meditate with that for a bit, and maybe get some drumming or a song that reminds you of the bear. I'd love, getting a song, and then when you feel that relationship is built up with a few meditations, of maybe making an offering to the bear spirits, or you could do that by adopting them, or charity work. It doesn't have to be all super. It can be very practical. After maybe spending time connecting with them, maybe holding a ceremony where you make a really boundary safe space for yourself or within a group, and using drumming, which is how I like to do it, but you might have a different way of doing it, or using the voice. You ask that bear spirit to come into you and to work with you, or you can journey in shamanic journey and visualize yourself morphing into them, and just maybe get someone else to drum for you, to hold that space for you while you do it. And maybe the thing will happen for a few times, but I reckon with that connection you'll get something of that energy coming in for you.
So it's a big undertaking, really. It's not something you can do, okay, today I'm going to I'm going to be a bear, and tomorrow I'll be a wolf. It's actually a real time-consuming connection.
I mean, you probably could do it that way, but I feel like you'll get more from it, and your connection with the animal will be a lot stronger and more powerful and rich if we put that work in as well. And we take so much from the animal kingdom that I feel like, if we could just give back to receive something extra healing magic, then that would be really beautiful. Like all relationships, if you have a friend that comes by and takes all the time, you just get a bit like, I can't bother with you. But it's the same with guides, isn't it? So maybe doing something where you give back, or you dedicate that time, because humans are known for being pretty untrustworthy by the spirit world. So just saying, look, I'm here, I'm turning up, I'm making this little altar to the bear, and maybe find the right time of the month or whatever for you to really put that ritual in and go for it.
So I feel this is almost the same as deities. So remember back in like the early 2000s, where you would literally be like picking deities off a supermarket shelf. You'd be like, right, in this ritual, we're going to use this deity, and they need a pair. So we're going to pluck this one out of the air. I've not worked with either of them before. We're just going to appear, and then everything is going to be great. And, there's a path for that, and that I understand that, but I think now the general way that we work is that we don't just kind of think it's in bulk, we need a a deity that's Irish, it's Samhain, we need a crone. We have a deep connection with our deities, and we spend time getting to know them. We spend time connecting with them, learning about them, growing their energy within us. And I feel that actually, in terms of shape shifting, maybe we need to do the same. And that's what you're explaining.
Yeah, I think it's deeper and richer and kinder for
Mm-hmm.
everybody, I think. And you don't, if you are, bringing something else into your being as well, you want to have knowing what you're bringing into your being as well. You could be saying he's a crow, but is that a crow? You know what I mean? Like, you just want to be sure, like, okay, I'm going to work with, with this energy and get to know how it feels. Also, what you want to share with that being, what you want to learn from it as well. It's good to be clear on those things to have a better
Mm,
experience.
absolutely. So, um, you work quite a bit with the Morrigan as well, don't you? How
Yes.
do you how do you combine your Morrigan work with your Norse work?
I'm on timeshare. I think Margaret's been recently, she's been like tapping me like, okay, we're done now. Are we done yet? Like, we've got stuff to do this way. And but I do think it's all not in joke, I don't mean that, but it's in good spirits. I think
Mm,
Freya and Morrigan are like, there's an okayness there. It's like
mm,
absolutely, but and also I think we separate things a lot more than maybe the gods do. Like, it's the work gets done, it gets done. But it is interesting because I know, like, it's finding the time. It's been very Norse centric for me for the last few years because of the degree. My degree is winding up now. The Morrigan's tapping on my neck
mm,
with a beak. So but I think you can they are, and I'm not trying to make them the same because I know they're very 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 different, but there are crossovers where and there are characters which do connect quite well in those two sort of worlds. But it's also the worlds we walk, isn't it? Like, we're here in England, which has many cultures in this place, and
mm.
including Viking parts and Celtic parts, and and different areas. So yeah, it's I think it's a goddess timeshare. I can't say anything better. And an Odin, and then there's a Norns, and there's never a dull moment, basically.
Absolutely. So, um, I I hear that you running retreats quite a lot. So
Yeah,
I must admit that I when I see things being run, and I'm sure it's the same with the things, my workshops and things, sometimes they just kind of almost pass me by. So you see like a glance of them and you think, oh, I must find out about that. And then
yeah,
that's gone and you've forgotten it. And um,
yeah.
but one thing that I kind of, when I hear the word retreat, I get a bit nervous and I think,
Mm.
well, this is going to be a lot of time. This is going to be, 3 days doing nothing but magical work. And actually, I've got appointments that I need to see. And so, um, what is a retreat
Yeah.
and what time do I need to give to it?
That's a really good point. And when I did the Morrigan one, which was last weekend, I made a point of calling it an intensive, not a retreat. Because I think the words Morrigan and retreat, it was like, I was like, it's more like a workout. It's just like, and actually, but yeah, it's a nice word because it means you're taking, retreating away from your daily life to be in this space. I quite like that. But yeah, what I love about doing it online, like, it's so good to do it in person, and I'm planning some more things like in-person things because it means people can literally switch off and be in that space. But when you are at
Mm,
home, there's a kind of a gift and a pain from it. You don't get to be in that space with people in a physical
mm,
space, but you do get your own time to do it. So if you can put aside an hour a day or half an hour and then nothing the next day, and because even though I run retreats usually 9 days or 3 days, um, because for some reason I find that just keeps the energy contained and
mm,
strong, but it doesn't mean you have to do it in that time. Like, if I send the
mm,
workout, some people do it along with the but as
mm,
people go, actually, I haven't got time to do that now. I'll check in every day, but I'll do the work over a month,
mm,
and that's absolutely fine. So it's like to offer it in a shorter space because it means my energy is really holding it
mm,
strongly, but that doesn't mean you have to. So if I'm always open. I do lives on them, but they're recorded. It's nice if people can check it. It's obviously lovely, and it's nice to build. It does, even though it's online, it does build holding a connection and a group, which is really, really nice. But even if people have only just made a little altar and lit a candle, they can still come in onto those lives and be part of it. It doesn't mean you have to have done all of the work. So I like the online aspect because it does respect that we have appointments and homework and washing up and all this sort of stuff. But also, if you want to spend half an hour here and then maybe 2 hours tomorrow and then nothing the next day, that's absolutely fine.
Okay, so really they're things that we can do in our own time, and you're not going to tell me off for not
No,
putting as much into it as I could have.
no, people kind of go to, I'm so sorry, I'm behind. I'm like, it's not a test. This is yours. Like, you don't apologize to me at all. Like, the fact that you want to do it and that you put, I think putting some energy in is good. You know, but that could just be creating an altar, lighting it, a candle every day. That's, you know, that's all you have to do, or even, you know, just put your thoughts towards it sometimes. But the amount of work or partaking that you do is completely up to you, and you know, over the time span that works for you as well. So yeah, no one gets told off. People think they're going to get told off all the time. Like, when have I ever told you off? Like, it's not going to happen.
So the next one that you've got coming up, I think, is the Winter Mothers, and I love the mothers. You know, I've spent a lot of time thinking about them, and you know, I associate them with the Dizir and the Norns. So it's
Yeah.
something that in the winter time, and particularly just around Christmas, I always think I'm going to do a big chunk of work with the mothers, and I never do. So I'm absolutely now thinking maybe this is my time. So
Yeah.
what would I expect from the Winter Mothers retreat?
When the reason, I mean, that out of all of them I've done, that's probably the most retreaty, as in like the most, it is that winter resting and honoring and journeying inwards. But I actually did this because I'm the same. I was like, if I don't make something, then is that the worst season of the year, isn't it, for being able to have these great ideas, but then suddenly you're running around and it gets full on. So I create that space so that not only could I just do that work that I've been promising myself every year that didn't happen, that also that people would have that holding space to do it as well, because we know it's such a crazy time of year. And I run it just before the solstice, so you've got time to kind of get in that space, because sometimes the solstice just creeps up on you and you're like, holy crap, that's happened. And then it's Christmas and then you're rolling into you know, the next year. So just having that stillness in that time, and again, don't, it's energetic. You can have a big busy day, but the retreat holding is in that deep winter stillness. It's in, yeah, it's in that deep fate weaving, going into the fires, going into the ancestors, connecting with the animals and the land in a very, very deep way, and the Kaliak. I don't specifically say which deity. There are deities that hold the space, so it's 9 days. I usually break this up into three lots of three themes. It will be different from last year. So there'll be deities that hold the space. But if you have a deity that comes to you and go, we're doing this, and that's, you know, there's space for that as well. But there's sort of themed work, journeys, meditations, and little rituals as well. But they're not crazy, you know, they're gentle, but they're powerful and gentle because of the time of the year. Where the ones I've just done have a bit more, okay, right, we're going in for the winter, let's do this. So the idea is find that stillness, that nurturing, that rest, that magic, that soul retrieval in that winter time, and holding that space with the mothers and honoring the mothers before we move into that crazy Christmas time.
And do you think there'll be a time when you start doing programs and courses on shape-shifting, particularly avian shape-shifting, having learned so much about it, if you're not sick of it by then?
No, I mean, I'm not sick of it yet. I'm still not sick of it. Again, I was saying to you earlier, I've read it so much, I didn't know what I knew. So my brain was going, but yeah, I do feel that I'm always wanting to make sure I really know something before I offer it. And I'm always wanting to make sure I really feel it's settled in. But once my degree is over in December, so soon, I will for next year start bringing some more of that into my work.
That sounds amazing, and I will be first on the list for that. So we've spoken in length, gone all over different subject areas, but it's been absolutely fascinating, and I always love talking to you.
And me to you.
Is there anything else you want to add, or anything that you feel we didn't quite cover?
No, No, I mean, I pretty much that's it. I always think as well, like when you're doing your journeys, whatever they are, like if you're doing your meditations or shamanic work or whatever, is to, I'm such a thing about creating from those experiences, like bringing that magical reality into your day-to-day life. So I paint it, you don't have to paint it, you know, you could write it into a poem, or you could weave something, or you could whatever you
Mm.
do that is your creative thing. And doesn't, no, I don't mean I am good at it, I mean what you enjoy
Mm.
doing, like singing or music or whatever. But I think it's really lovely that when you do go on these magical journeys, they can stay there sometimes, and then you get on with life and life can really sweep you away.
Mm.
But bringing that fabric back into this world and creating
Mm.
something which is like an anchor, they're reminding you. And I always find that when I paint something that's from a journey, it's always people go, oh, that
Mm.
she's alive. There's something about it, and people need that. I think that reminder of that
Mm.
presence. So whatever your gift is, or whatever your joy is, it's not about being. Again, I'm not sort of judging. Whatever you're good at doesn't mean that. Whatever your
Mm.
joy is, if you go on these journeys to bring something back and to create something physical in this realm, is really lovely and inspires others, but also creates that bridge a bit stronger.
I still remember the painting you did of
Yeah.
a wild hunt, right? We did many, many years ago. And every time I see that painting, I'm drawn straight back into that ritual. So I can really
Yes.
see how that works. And I maybe start doing that now. I might start thinking about, I would take photos more than paint, but maybe putting a
Yeah.
post together, or even like just a few lines, just to
Yeah.
really kind of bring that manifestation into this world. So I'm really glad you brought that up, because it's
Yeah.
something I don't remember to do.
No, it is, isn't it? Because we do those things, but it's like the bridge, and when you're having a shitty day, remembering that that magic is there and you see it and you feel something tangible and go, ah,
Mm.
yeah, okay, I get it. Or you feel that in support, and vice versa, that we're not forgetting our magical experiences.
So that this has been amazing. It's been really great to chat, and we must do more on different subjects,
I
particularly
agree.
as you've got all this knowledge now about Seath.
Before I
And
forget it.
yes, I want to really kind of squeeze it out of you and really like get all this information through, because it looks like there's only a few Eddas and there's only a few sagas, but there isn't. It's an enormous amount to
Yeah,
to
and the
pick
archaeological
through.
evidence as well. Like
Mm.
there's so many what people of blah, 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 blah. What people often think is a horned helmet is bird heads on a helmet. It's just like and that's usually pre-Viking age. So not so much with the Vendel period and Sutton Hoo and lots of things like that. On the Sutton Hoo, they're birds on their heads. It's like I love that, and you think it's horns. Like you look at it again and no, that's a bird head. Like and there's on some of the shields on the Sutton Hoo, I was looking at in the British Museum recently, they're sort of bird shamans, they're like men birds on it. You're just like, it makes me so excited, Katie.
See, I never knew that. So I've been every time I talk about the Uruz rune and the Oryx, I'm like, wow, this may have been, and I never knew that it was actually bird
Well, some of
beaks.
them might have been, oryx, but there's
Mm.
definitely birds as well. Bird dancers was quite a thing like this. And again, that's, I'm saying it's about women, but that were all men. So it's pre-Viking age, but
Mm.
these bird dancers. And yeah, or that could be a blessing of the Valkyrie. It could have been the blessing of the bird cult on the warriors. I don't know. We don't know. But you see these things in the archaeology as well. So you've got the sagas and the Eddas, but things are always being uncovered. Like, that there's the coin with Odin and the ravens, and the oldest one that was found. I'm
Mm.
Odin's man, and it has ravens on it, and there's just things still being found all the time. So that's great. You can say we've got a little bit, but there's always things being discovered as
Mm.
well.
And we're learning so much with so much we're putting together. So
Yeah.
yeah, we will talk much more about all of these subjects. So yeah, it's been absolutely brilliant,
Thank
and
you.
we will speak again. It's great
Thank you
to
very
be
much.
with you.
Thank you.